Welcome back. Every Thursday here on News 9 at 9 o'clock, we're going in depth with Oklahoma City Police Chief Wade Gourley.
There was a deadly officer-involved shooting last week. This morning, we're sitting with the chief talking about the decline, though, in the use of deadly force this year compared to last year. Here's Lisa Monahan.
Oklahoma City Police Chief Wade Gourley in studio this morning to talk about issues facing our city. And this week we're talking about officer-involved shootings. Welcome, Chief. I know last week we had an officer open fire on a man who was waving a gun around inside a senior center. He pointed the gun at officers. This was the first time an officer has used deadly force so far this year. Of course, even one is too much for the department.
Absolutely, and that's the way we look at these. Is we want to do everything we can to avoid these circumstances. They're not good for the community. They're definitely not good for the officers that are involved. But sometimes, you know, the suspect places those officers in a situation where the lives of not only the officer themselves, but the general public and those that are around there. And that's what we ran into with this issue. Is there was a lot of people in this complex and standing out in front when the officers arrived.
I know that de-escalation is a big part of how officers are trained. Can you talk a little bit about how officers work through things like simulations of sorts to prepare for this type of incident?
So it was in 2021, we created the reality-based training unit, and all of our patrol officers and their supervisors have been through this training. Actually, all officers on the department have been through some form of it. But it's very realistic scenarios that allow officers to interact with a live person, you know, that, and they take instances that we've dealt with before that they get off body camera and other things. So these are very realistic situations with role players. Also, what's unique about it is anything that we have access to in the field, we have as a training version. So we have training versions of our tasers, of our firearms with simunitions, and so it's very realistic training, and it teaches the officers to de-escalate, to use less lethal when they can, and try to do everything they can to avoid a deadly force encounter.
I know as a community, and I'm sure as a department, we learn from these incidents every year as we go through. And normally, by this time of the year, we've typically seen several instances where officers are forced to use that deadly force to get out of that situation safely. Anything that you would attribute to the drop? I think we have pulled some numbers that there's been a drop in these particular cases. As you can see right there on the screen, I mean, you see that there have been slowly dropping down. What would you attribute this to?
Well, always, you know, you can't predict what a suspect is going to do, what someone that you interact with is going to do when it comes to violent behavior. But anything that we can do as police officers to avoid putting ourselves in a position that forces that issue, that's what we're doing, and that's what we're working on. The department has deployed more or less lethal devices. We're just about to deploy 50 more of the 40 millimeter less lethal. Those have been very effective and been able to resolve armed confrontations. And then the use of drones has allowed us to get eyes on a scene and communicate with an individual instead of having an officer go up there. We've had several instances over the last year where we've had armed individuals in a vehicle. We've been able to fly a drone into that situation and allow them to look and see that the person is armed, and then it allows us to use less lethal and not approach that car, talk that person out, and just be patient. We really teach our officers to be patient and to slow things down. So my hope is that, you know, again, we don't have any more of these. That's our goal. We try to get to every year, but we know sometimes circumstances dictate and put those officers in situations that they don't want to be in, and we know the community doesn't want them to be in as well.
Well, we certainly hope that we get through the rest of the year without any incident. Thanks for the insight this morning.
Absolutely.
If you have a question about this or any other topic, you can send an email and we'll get you some answers. Just send it to chatwiththechief@griffin.news. We'll see you next week.